Welcome back to Forza Motorsport. Today, we're doing another Forza Motorsport tutorial. If you missed it the other day, I posted a video on how to level up your cars super easily and quickly. In today's video, I'm going to show you everything you need to know about drifting, from how to choose your first drift car, to the upgrades and the tuning you want, and then we're gonna jump on a circuit, we're gonna bring up the controller cam, and I'm gonna show you exactly what you need to do to get sideways in Forza Motorsport. As always, if this tutorial helps you, consider subscribing to the channel for more Forza Motorsport videos. Before we get into the actual tutorial though, there are two things you need to know. Number one, so much of drifting is about personal preference. If you're an experienced drifter, you can probably drift just about anything. But if you're new, you might want to consider following along with some of the things I'm going to show you in this video, because it might be a good stepping stone to get you started. And number two, unfortunately, at the time of recording this video, there isn't actually a proper drift mode in the new Forza Motorsport game. You can still go online with your friends, create a private lobby, and go drifting together, but there isn't any drift score, which is really unfortunate. So hopefully the developers add that at some point in the future. We'll keep fingers crossed. Let's jump into our tutorial though and start things off with what cars you should actually be drifting. As you scroll through the car list, there's a ton of cars in here, and because so much of drifting is about personal preference, you can actually go and drift anything you want in here. But if you are just getting started, there are going to be some things you might want to avoid. For example, things like this, the Citroen DS3. It's an awesome car, but it's front wheel drive, which is just going to mean drifting is going to be a lot harder. You're also going to want to avoid things like this, the Ferrari F8. It's an awesome car to go and drive around in. Because of its mid-engine nature, it's just going to be a little bit harder. And last but not least, you're also going to want to avoid things like this, proper race cars. Although they are what we're looking for in terms of the drivetrain being front engine and rear wheel drive, most of the time they have very, very sticky tires, which isn't what we want for drifting. If you are just starting out, consider something like this, the brand new Nissan Z. It's front engine, rear wheel drive. It has a ton of customization options available for it, and is a great platform to start drifting with. For today's video though, I'm gonna use a car that I've actually been driving in my Let's Play series. It's actually a Toyota Supra, the brand new one. And the one I've got in my garage is already level 50, so that means I can do any upgrades that I want to it. Congratulations, you've got your car, and now we're gonna go and do some upgrades. Specifically, we're gonna go into the upgrade and tuning menu, and then we're gonna jump into our car and into performance upgrade. If you just bought your car and you jump into this menu, most of the options are going to be locked. So I would recommend upgrading your car to level 20 as a minimum if you are just starting out. That'll unlock things like more horsepower mods. It'll unlock suspension options and weight reduction, all very important modifications that we're going to be doing to our car. If you need to level up your car, check out my video I uploaded earlier on how you can level up your car as quickly as possible. I actually like to work on my cars in a strange way though. I don't actually start with the fuel and air or the engine. I actually start all the way in conversions. I work backwards. You can take a look at all of the engine swaps that are available for this Supra. You've got things like a straight 4, a straight 5, big 6.2 liter V8, and even a V12 swap. Like I said, so much of drifting is about personal preference, so if you want to go and drift a car with a big V12, you most certainly can. But if you are just starting out, you're gonna want to look for a horsepower figure and a torque figure that are relatively close in value. That's why I usually recommend to people who are just starting out to swap in the 6.2 liter V8, because it has an identical horsepower and torque figure. But for this Toyota Supra, we're just gonna leave the stock engine in because the numbers are close enough. After that, you can mess around with a body kit if your car has one. This doesn't really change the way your car drives. Sometimes it'll just give you the option of adding wider tires to your vehicle. So if you're running something with a huge amount of horsepower, you might want to consider swapping on a wide body kit so you can get more grip. But again, since we're just getting started, we're going to keep our Toyota Supra bone stock. If you're working in the same order I am, you'll then arrive at aero and appearance. Again, none of this stuff is really going to make a big impact on your driving. So have fun, customize your vehicle's looks to whatever you want. This next menu is super important. Here are the things I would recommend. A clutch, it's just going to make your shifts a little bit faster and make your car, again, more predictable, which is what we want to focus on since we're just learning. A transmission, we're going to toss that in so we can actually tune our gears. That'll become important later. And a differential, specifically a race differential, that is going to be hugely important. After that, you come to your wheels. Toss whatever wheels you want. These are just to look cool. After you've got your wheels on, you will arrive at your tires. Here you can mess around with your tire width and your tire compound. Again, a lot of this stuff is going to be personal preference, but the way we're going with this specific build, we're not going to be running that much horsepower, so let's just bump up the front tire width 1 notch, the rear tire width probably 2 notches is fine. And our tire compound, we're going to go sport tires. Unfortunately, in Forza Motorsport, there aren't actually any drift tires, so sport I've found is the best option for me. Again, working backwards through the menus, you'll arrive at your brakes. Again, something very important you're going to want to get on your car because slowing down is important. Let's get some race brakes. A roll cage, not super important for what we're doing. Ballast, again, you don't really need that. Anti-roll bars are important. Let's get those in. And the most important upgrade, probably of them all, is drift suspension. Drift suspension will actually allow you to tune your suspension and give it more steering angle. And it does a really good job of setting the car up right out of the box with like the perfect camber and a lot of really good suspension settings. And then we will wrap this up with some race weight reduction. Weight reduction isn't actually mandatory. It's just going to make your car a little bit easier to drive, especially if you're coming from Forza Horizon. Our car's weight is going from 3,300 pounds down to 2,700 pounds. And then after that, you get to your engine upgrades. You've got both engine and fuel and air upgrades. And again, you can kind of toss on whatever upgrade parts you want on in here, but keep in mind, you're going to want to keep that horsepower and the torque numbers fairly similar. The only real upgrade you're gonna want to watch out for when you're upgrading your car is your turbo upgrade. It doesn't really matter that much on a single turbo car, but if you've got things with like twin turbos, sometimes it can crank your horsepower and leave your torque bone stock, which isn't gonna be great for drifting. For the purposes of this video though, we don't actually need our turbo upgrade, so we're just gonna leave that bone stock and finish our upgrades there. We've got 600 horsepower, 600 foot-pounds of torque. We are very lightweight, and I think we've got a good drift car. If you follow the video up to this point, you've got your front engine, rear-wheel drive car, and you've got similar upgrades to the upgrades that I've got. Congratulations, you have already built a drift car that can actually get sideways through some corners really nicely. But you might be having problems getting sideways. So let me show you some things that might be causing you some issues. For example, your assist. There are some things you're gonna wanna focus on in here. For example, suggested line. I like to leave that on. You'll see why in a second. Braking, you can totally run with ABS off, but since we're just getting started, ABS on. Throttle, make sure that's on unassisted. Your steering, you're gonna want that on normal. Again, you can totally run simulation, but since we're just starting out, normal. The 3 things that are gonna be super important for this though is traction control turned off, stability control turned off, and shifting on manual. Once you've got all your settings done, save your assist, and then jump back onto the circuit. And again, if you followed things up to this point, you could probably just leave your car in 3rd or 4th gear, and you're gonna be going sideways, no problem. But again, we can make life even easier. Instead of heading into your assist, this time head into the tune car menu. This is where personal preference comes in key though, and you're gonna notice things depending on like what circuit you're drifting on, how much horsepower your car has. Even the time of day that you're racing at will play an effect as to how you're going to want to set up the car. I'm going to give you a basic rundown of kind of what does what though, so you can make your own adjustment. Your tire pressure plays a huge effect on how much grip you have. If your car's super slippery and you want more grip out of it, consider lowering your tire pressure down to get more grip. The opposite's also true. If the rear of your car is super grippy, try raising your tire pressure up a bit. For me personally, I've been a big fan of 28 tire pressure in the front and 26 in the rear. After that is your gearing, and your gearing is super impacted on what circuit you're actually driving on. A general rule of thumb I've always gone for, though, is aim for your third gear to be around 110, 120, 130 miles an hour or so. I'm gonna go for gear ratios like this, and I'm only gonna move my final drive. Obviously, you can fine-tune this if you want, but that's where we're gonna go for now. After that, you get to our alignment, and if you put drift suspension on, this is the way it'll look. And it's good, but it could be better. Personally, I like to have a lot of camber on the front of my car, and I like to have a little bit of camber on the rear. Again, without getting too much into all of like the nitty gritty of all of this stuff, this is basically going to allow your car to step out and slide through the corners, but also make it predictable, which is what we're going for. One thing you're definitely going to want is your steering angle maxed out to 60 degrees. That's going to make it so you can hold bigger angles. After that, you can come to your anti-roll bars, which, to be honest, if you're just starting out, not super important. And honestly, the same can be said for your suspension. It's not super important if you're just starting out. Consider slamming your car down if you want it to look cool, though. What is kind of important, though, is your dampening. The dampening is basically how quickly your shocks go up and down and pushed against your car and against the circuit. Again, though, without getting into all of the nitty-gritty, if you want your vehicle to be more predictable, consider putting this towards soft. You oftentimes see, if you ever watch Formula Drift in real life, those cars are super, super soft because the drivers want them to be super predictable. So again, mess around with all of this stuff as much as you want, but if you want your vehicle to be kind of grippier and more predictable, consider going towards soft. But if your vehicle is having trouble kind of stepping out, consider turning your suspension up and making it stiffer. After that, your suspension geometry, again, not super important for drifting, so we're just gonna skip that. After that, you'll arrive in your aero, and if you've got a rear wing, you can customize it if you want. You don't need to, though. I just like putting mine a little bit towards speed, but not important. After your aero, you'll arrive at your brakes. And again, this is something that is super up to personal preference. For me personally, I like to leave my brake balance 50-50 and then turn my brake force up to around 120%. Some people out there, though, like to throw front brake pressure on to kind of make the car feel like a pendulum as soon as you get on the brakes. Again, mess around with this option to see what feels good for you. I like to run it like this, though. The last thing we're going to mess around with is our differential. That's going to mean how much our wheels are going to slip. And long story short, if you're drifting, you want to lock up your differential. That's going to mean your inside wheel and your outside wheel spin at the same rate. Again, making your vehicle predictable. And if you're on a steering wheel, you can mess around with some of this stuff, but I'm on a controller, so we don't have to. Just to make life super easy, I'm actually going to save and share this tune so you guys can download it yourself. I'm just going to call it AR12 Drift. Feel free to download it if you'd like to use the exact car that I'm using in this video. For our first exercise, we're actually going to hit up the old version of Le Mans, and specifically the Massive Straight, just so we can do like some test drives over there. Now that we're on the circuit, we can bring up the controller cam. I'm using this, the Thrustmaster eSwap controller, but obviously this will work with any controller out there. Thrustmaster is one of my sponsors though, so if you'd like to check out this controller, there's a link down below for this as well. Once we've arrived at the back straight of Le Mans, we're actually gonna leave our car in third gear, so no need to mess around with any of our gears. Then just go full throttle and start turning left and right in a lane. Just tapping your steering left and right. You're gonna feel the car wanting to step out. You can feel the back end kind of leaning into the corners. You can see the car leaning into the corners. Once you get comfortable with the car leaning left and right like that, and you can see the tires wanting to spin up, consider shifting up to fourth gear. Now we can get some speed on and actually start drifting. The way we're gonna wanna do this is by coming in, leaving full throttle on, and just letting the car do its thing. We're just gonna leave it in fourth gear, turn hard left, turn back to the right, and you can see that back end come around. And naturally, you're gonna wanna keep your car going down the straight, so you're gonna be counter steering. That's what I'm doing. Watch my left thumb here. I'm gonna come down the straight, left, right, and then back to left to keep the car in a straight line. Left, right, and then back to left. And eventually you'll find a place in time where you can start balancing the throttle on your car. So we're driving left, right, left, and now we're just balancing the throttle as we do that the whole way down. we're still just steering left and right. It's nothing special. We're not pressing the handbrake. We're just turning left and right. That's all. If you notice, sometimes you're coming into the corner like this and your car wants to spin out on you like that, you've probably got too much gas on. You're going to want to lift off on your gas a little earlier. And if your car is doing the opposite and it's not stepping out on you, like it's just not going, you probably need to get on the gas a little more. Eventually, with enough time, you'll find the perfect balance where you can just go left, right, and then get the car going sideways. Exercise number 1, you've nailed it. Congratulations. Now, if you want to make things a little bit more complex, you might want to start integrating the handbrake. The handbrake will lock up the rear wheels. The handbrake is super useful for 2 things. Again, I'm just going to come into the corner the same way we were, but this time I'm going to hold the handbrake. And now you can just see, instead of my car switching back to the other side, it's still pointing that direction. Essentially, if you're going around a longer corner, you might need to press the handbrake to hold your drift for that little bit longer so you stay on the circuit. The handbrake can also be useful. Instead of snapping your car left and right like we were, you can just kind of rip the handbrake and your car will just step out. Again, it's kind of like a time and place thing and balancing all of those 3 things. For exercise number 3, we're actually going to change circuits again, but this time to the version of Le Mans with the chicane. Now that we're back out to the circuit, though, we can continue doing that left and right snapping that we were before. But keep in mind, there's a chicane coming. Now, the reason I had you turn on the full racing line is because the racing line is actually kind of a great indicator of when you can start initiating your drift into the upcoming corner. So if we back up a little bit, you can see right about here-ish, kind of in the shadow of that tree, it starts to turn to the right. So if we can time our snaps to the left and to the right with that shadow, then we should be able to make that corner. There's a couple of different things we're going to want to focus on. Number 1, we are starting in the right-hand lane for this, going around a right-hand corner. Here's when we're going to want to pick up speed, get up into 4th gear. Then you can do that snap to the side and then snap it into the corner like that. Then all you're doing is holding that snap into the corner. That's it. Nothing special. You're literally doing the exact same as that snap left and right that we were doing. All you're doing this time is aiming your front wheels with where you want to go. Look at my front wheels. They are pointing directly at that apex. As you're drifting, you're going to feel the car move left and right, obviously. But you always want to keep your wheels pointed right at that apex so you can hit it. So if I'm picking up from here, I'm turning hard to the left already. We can resume. Then we're just kind of modulating our lefts and our rights. And it's the same thing here. Look at our tires the whole time. We're aiming right where we want to go. Right at that apex. We're not going super fast. I'm kind of just modulating the gas. As soon as we see that racing line turn, that's when we can snap it this way and then back. And then just aim those wheels right at the apex. And you see we hit them. We hit the apex just like that. And congratulations. You can drift if you can do all of that. Obviously, as you're driving around, not every single corner is going to be exactly the same. So experiment on different tracks, on different types of corners. For example, this corner coming up is a much tighter right-hand corner. Same thing. We're going to start on the inside, snap it to the outside, aim for that apex, and we just keep going. It is literally as simple as that. If you can balance the gas, the turning, and the handbrake, you can drift any car, any circuit. I hope this helped you get sideways. If it did, consider subscribing. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.